The lesson outcome for this video is I can use the quadratic formula to solve. Alright, so we have seen quadratic equations in previous units. We have, in this case, y equals 2x squared minus 3x minus 20. And in the past, what we've done a lot of is factoring. And remember, if this was a 1 right here, we would factor by putting two sets of parentheses down and finding out the factors of negative 20 that add up to negative 3 and so on. But with the 2 out in front, we either need a different factoring method or we need to use something called the quadratic formula. It's the formula that helps you find the values of x when you know that y equals 0. So just like the table we've used in other units, if we have a 0 in here for y, what is our x value? Now remember, those are also going to be our x-intercepts if we were to graph it, and more on that later. So what we need to do is we need to find our values for a, b, and c, and we need to put them into a formula called the quadratic formula. And I just realized that's not this right here because that is the, the quadratic formula, some blanks in it. So I'm going to give you the quadratic formula right here. Okay? Okay. So the quadratic formula is right here. It's x equals the opposite of b, or sometimes we say negative b, plus or minus, we're going to talk more about that, the square root of this whole thing, b squared, minus 4 times a times c, and then that whole thing is divided by 2 times a. Now again, notice the division bar here is after the equal sign, so x equals, and then this whole thing is a fraction. So write that down very carefully in your notes. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about where these different values of a, b, and c come from. See all these a's and b's and c's? Well, they come from the quadratic equation right here, and we've talked about this before as well, but I'm just going to remind you that it's y equals ax squared minus plus bx plus c is our normal quadratic equation. So in this case, we know that our a value is 2 because it's the coefficient of x squared. Our b value is negative 3 because it's the coefficient of x. And our c value is negative 20 because it's the constant. So if we put those numbers up here in our spots up here, I'm going to put a 2 in for a up here, and I'm going to put a 3 in for b, okay, and negative 3 goes in for b right here, so negative 3, and our c value, our constant, is negative 20, so negative 20 goes in for c. Now again, those negatives and positives are very important. Okay, so the 2 is positive, the 3 is negative, and the c value is negative. Now we're going to put those values for a, b, and c into our quadratic formula where they belong. So notice there is a b here and here, there's an a here, and there's a c right here. Alright, so we have x equals negative b, or the opposite of the b value. Now our b value is negative 3, right? So when we put the negative 3 right here, we do need to include the negative sign. So what it ends up looking like is negative 3, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. So negative 3 goes there. Negative 3 also goes right here, because those are both b's in our formula. Now we're going to put the a value of 2 in here and here, so a 2 goes down here, so times 2, and a 2 goes here. And notice I use parentheses. And then we're going to use our c value just in one location, which is right here, right? So negative 20 goes in that set of parentheses there. All right, now once we put those values in correctly into the formula, all we need to do is simplify it. But people make mistakes with this, so take your time and make sure you watch each and every step. So first of all, this negative 3, it's a negative or opposite of negative 3. Well, the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. So negative 3 becomes positive 3 down here. So I'm going to change this to a positive 3. So now we have a positive 3, because negative 3 becomes positive 3. And we wouldn't even need that there if we didn't want it there. Now, the next thing we need to do is right here, be careful, -3 squared. Now, if you typed in -3 squared on your calculator without these parentheses, you're going to get -9, which is not true. Because anytime you take a negative number and square it, which means multiply it by itself, you're going to get a positive. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So -3 squared is -3 times -3, which is +9. So a +9 goes there. Now, another place that people make mistakes is over here, because there's this minus sign right here, and if we bring that minus sign right to here, then we have to ignore it when we do this multiplication, which is one way of doing this. And there's another way of doing it too, thinking about that as being a -4, but instead I'm going to bring that negative right here, that subtraction sign right here, and I'm going to multiply 4 times 2 times -20. Well, 4 times 2 is 8. And 8 times -20 is -160. So we now have -160 -160 right here, -160. All right, more to come on that in just a minute. Now down here we have 2 times 2, because it's 2 times the a value, and the a value is 2. So 2 times 2, which is 4. All right. So to keep simplifying, again, I don't need this negative sign anymore. If you see this, we don't need this anymore because that negative sign became positive when we squared, when we made a -3 into a +3. So we can just write a 3 right here. So it's 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus -160. Well, minus a minus makes a plus, so 9 plus 160, which is 169. Under our square root, and then in the bottom, in the denominator, we have a 4. All right, now at this point, we still have some steps to go, even though it says final answer right here. Okay, we do still have some steps to go. I'm going to move this way here. So we have x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 169. Well, the square root of 169 is 13. So we can now put a 13 in right here, divided by 4. All right, now plus or minus means exactly what it sounds like. It means you need to add these two numbers or subtract them. And in fact, we actually have to do both. So we need to do 3 plus 13 and then divide that by 4. And we need to do 3 minus 13 and divide that answer by 4. So a lot of times what I will do is actually split this up into two different equations. X equals 3 plus 13 divided by 4, and x equals 3 minus 13 divided by 4. So the plus went this way and the minus went that way, right? The plus or minus. Plus, add them here, minus, subtract them there. Now, you also have to be very, very careful with your calculator at this step. Okay, because if you use a calculator and you type 3 plus 13 divided by 4 all out on your calculator together, you are going to get the wrong answer. Okay, if you type 3 plus 13 divided by 4, the calculator is going to do the division first because that's the order of operations, because it can't tell where you have parentheses or what you want to be done first, which in this case is addition. So it would give you 6.25. We do not want 6.25. Okay, the way you can avoid that is either use parentheses around your 3 plus 13 in your calculator, or just write one more step of simplification. 3 plus 13 is 16, and we have 16 divided by 4. Well, 16 divided by 4 is 4. And over here, one more step of simplification, 3 minus 13 is -10, and -10 divided by 4 will give us our second answer, -2.5. So, just like when we factored, we end up with two different answers most of the time, not always, much of the time. We'll end up with two answers for x when our y value is 0. So we can put 4 as one of our x values when y is 0, and we could have another one at -2.5. So again, solving a quadratic equation when y is 0 to find the x values can be done instead of factoring by using the quadratic formula.